Yes, Christmas came early this year. Today we're actually going to do the review on the Rudolph Reindeer game by Game Mail Entertainment. Now obviously I mentioned Rudolph on this channel a couple times from my top favorite Christmas specials and the sequel to Island of Misfit Toys. But today we're actually going to do the game that was developed by Game Mail Entertainment. Now obviously I decided to try this game out since I'm a big fan of this special myself, and I've actually kind of wanted to put my thoughts on it since ever since it first got announced. I was actually pretty intrigued since I've always wanted some kind of developer to make a Rudolph game that wasn't like the one from back in the day that was on the Wii, which I gotta say that game was a piece of shit because it felt more like a rush party game and you could pretty much beat the game in like 20 minutes. It really was really a rush game and there was no effort into it, so that's why that game was terrible. But with that being said though, when it comes to this game by Game Mill, I've always wanted them to finally make a Rudolph game. Even if it was by Game Mill or any other developer out there, I wanted them to actually finally make just like a good average Rudolph game. And in a way, I kind of wanted a RPG kind of game for Rudolph because it would be amazing if somebody actually made an RPG game based on Rudolph. Whether if it's like the Pokemon Mystery Dungeon games or just like Final Fantasy or any just other RPG games in that genre, it would have been nice to see it in particularly in that genre. Now, obviously, Game Mill has made this game, and obviously, I've kind of already mentioned before about Game Mill from my Miraculous Ladybug review. Game Mill is pretty much this decade's THQ. They kind of like pick up different IPs of different licensed games, whether if it's Disney, whether if it's Nickelodeon. It doesn't even matter what license they can get. They can pretty much just make anything off that, and they could pretty much rush it and just make a big profit out of it. In a way, Game Mill is kind of like that too. They've kind of made like Nickelodeon games, they made Miraculous Ladybug games, and then of course they recently did the Looney Tunes sports games, which I gotta say actually wasn't that bad. Now, they decided to do a Rudolph game. Now, when I saw the trailer for the announcement for this game, I was sort of really intrigued since, like I said before, I've really wanted them to finally make a Rudolph game. It didn't even matter who it was. But they were making the game, and I gotta say, I was pretty interested in playing it. After trying the game out, after playing a good solid hour, 2 hours into the game, I gotta say, it's not bad. It's pretty decent. However, it still has problems, and that's kind of where we're going to touch upon. Now, the consensus of this game pretty much is laid out as like a 3D platformer. Now, when I say it's a 3D platformer, I don't mean it's actually like a perfect platformer from like other platformers I played over the years. It's pretty much a lower tier platformer where like it's very slow, the graphics are very over tier, and obviously the camera is all over the place. This game feels a lot like a 3D platformer in itself, even though it is open world, which I gotta say, I really admire the idea that it's actually an open world game. Even though, yeah, it has 4 worlds, but I still admire it for what it is. And usually Game Mail doesn't really do those kind of things, where a lot of their games, a lot of times, is usually like, it's very like 2D and it's very like on inner levels, like you're pretty much stuck in one level. It doesn't really expand where you can just roam around, you look for collectibles. This game feels a little bit different from their previous titles, but I still think that the game overall, when it comes to the open world aesthetic, it does have its issues, mainly because of the camera. The camera, when you move around, you move around the character, whether you're playing as Rudolph, Clarice, Hermie, or Yukon Cornelius, a lot of times the camera does not want to cooperate. And there's been many times where I've actually moved my character around and the camera would just completely be unbearable to control. It is a really bad camera, and honestly, it doesn't surprise me from these kind of games when obviously this game felt like it was really rushed. So you could tell the camera was not in the right position that it was supposed to be. And for a game that came out in 2025, this should be something that should not be a problem anymore. This should be like at least polished and should be enough where you can play no problem. Now, for some reason, we still get these kind of games where the camera is still unbearable to control. I don't know why that is, but for some reason that developers like to keep this as like it's an ongoing trend for some reason. But yes, the camera as a whole for this game is just god-awful. It's definitely one of the worst things I've actually had to encounter with this game. Now, in terms of the camera, despite the camera, the characters, I do like that you get to play as all 4 characters. You play as Rudolph, Hermie, Clarice, and Yukon, which each of them have their own features in itself. The double jumps, I gotta say, is pretty good, and I like how all the characters have double jumps. That's something that I actually do not like in a lot of games nowadays where characters don't have double jumps. I miss the days where if you play games, they each have double jumps, so you can just go up in a higher platform. For some reason, games nowadays don't do that, which is really weird. I guess they just want to have people to have a challenge. This one felt like it had double jumps, which was great to see. Now, in terms of the characters play really well. You actually get to play as them in each different areas, and it's kind of nice. In terms of the objectives are pretty straightforward. You pretty much just kind of go around and collect different gold pieces everywhere, and that's pretty much what it is. It's basically like a collectathon like most different platformers. And in a way, it kind of reminded me a little bit like Mario 64, where obviously the game feels a lot like a Nintendo 64 game, of course. But it definitely felt like that, where you just went around, you collect different things, and in order to complete a certain level or certain area, you had to like get them all at once. You had to get a number of different gold pieces, and in a way, it was kind of fun in that way. But the way the game is and the way it's laid out, it was kind of really like, I guess you'd say it was rather difficult to say the least, because a lot of times where you had to deal with the camera, you basically had to like go around the area, and most of the areas felt like it was very like glitched, and that's kind of why I really did not really like the game all that much. It felt really glitchy, and it kind of felt very clunky at times. And definitely for what it is, I mean, obviously it is a licensed game. It's a very rushed licensed game to say the least. That obviously it's going to have these kind of issues, but either way, the objectives are pretty straightforward, and it's definitely like easy for people to kind of go in, especially for kids that kind of play this kind of game. It'd be pretty easy for them to try out. The boss battles in this game are also pretty straightforward, and it kind of suffers the same fate from other Game Mill games, where like it's very slow paced, it's very easy to beat, and doesn't really exactly have a challenge. But even though I'm not going to go in depth with it, I also don't want to spoil it, since I obviously think there's going to be a lot of other people that may want to play this game, especially people that love Rudolph and maybe want to try it for themselves. So pretty much the short version of it is that the bosses are pretty straightforward to beat. Like I mentioned earlier about the objectives. Now obviously with the objectives, since it is a collectathon and obviously you have to collect a lot of things, there's also some areas where you have to actually collect these ornaments. Now these ornaments you can just go around and basically do it as like a little bit like a challenge. And most of the missions that you do a lot of times are pretty scattered all through the areas. And most of the ornaments that you get, you can buy them from like shops. And it's kind of like what you do, like obviously like Mario Odyssey or like Donkey Kong Country, where like you could just go to the shops and they would already give you the ornaments, and you kind of already have them as it is. And here you can basically find them everywhere else. But I think if you're a completionist and you want to collect everything, I think doing them all I think is pretty good. And in my opinion, I think it's kind of one of the best things about this game, where you can just kind of go around, you collect as many as possible, you collect a lot of things. However, finding them can be a little bit of a challenge, considering that a lot of the areas can be very clunky, and camera can also be a little bit aggravating to kind of control. Though that's one of the things I really don't like in of itself, but then again, that's just me. In terms of the minor issues that I have with the game, the music overall is actually pretty good. Most of the music in this game felt like a lot like the special, and it definitely felt like it was very festive, and it felt like it was something that get everyone to the holiday spirit. It definitely felt like it was like the original special, where it had like those tunes, and it was kind of nice to see, and definitely felt like it was a lot like that. In terms of like the aesthetic of it, the game looks a lot like the original. The characters, the models look the same, and even though I would say some of them do kind of look a little bit off. I mean, one of them especially is the Hermie model, which I'm not really the biggest fan of, but then again, that's just me. I think a lot of it's just kind of just the fact that most of them just kind of look weird, but then again, in terms of the way the game is, where it feels like it's a lot like a PS2 and an N64 game, I can understand why the models do not look like it's going to be the greatest, but still, the game looks overall pretty good, and it looks a lot like the characters from the special. Now, in terms of the game, honestly, for me, I think overall, I think the game is okay. I mean, I think for me, it's definitely a game that I would probably may not ever play again, but I think it was kind of nice to just try out, since obviously I love the Rudolph special. But I think for people that are really into Rudolph, maybe they want to try this game out. And it's definitely a warm, cozy kind of platformer. And that's kind of why I think this game kind of holds up for what it is. Yet, I do think it does have a lot of issues, and I definitely think if this game was going to actually get people even more to play it, especially with the issues with the camera and everything, I think people would want to see like more patches. And in a way, this game definitely needs a lot of patches, because I do think the game definitely needs it, especially if they want to keep this game out and they want people to actually play it even more. I think patches are definitely something that needs to happen. However, I think for this game, I would say it's definitely a game that I think if anybody really likes Rudolph, I think they should try it out, or maybe just want to get it for their kids and they want to try something like this. Since it is a licensed game, and most of Game Mill's games feels like it's something that kids can only play for a certain amount of time and they'll be done with it. And the way this game kind of feels like that. But at least with this game, I would say it does have a little bit of like some effort to it, where it's trying to be a little bit like a 3D platformer. Even though I still think that they should make an RPG game like this, like for Rudolph, at maybe some point in the future, it'd be kind of nice. But it was still good to see that they actually made a game that was better than the previous one, like I mentioned, where it was like that piece of shit party game. But it was still pretty good regardless, even though it does have issues. And I do think that they should have done a little bit better with it, where it's not rushed. I still think it was still enjoyable for what it was. And overall, I think most people should definitely try this game out. especially with the upcoming holiday season. I think this is a great game to try out for kids and families, as it is something that people can play during the upcoming holiday season. But anyway, that is my review of the Rudolph game. Thank you guys for watching, and hope to see you guys in my next video.